Bizarre Reality Media. The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, I have the long-awaited return of Lon Strickler from Phantoms and Monsters, here today to discuss his upcoming book and shed some light on the Glimmerman phenomenon, along with some fascinating cryptid talk along the way. And for the .5 bonus episode, he shares his thoughts and investigations into cryptid canines with some encounter stories you will not want to miss. But to check that one out, you guys will have to make sure that you guys hop on over to the Bizarre Reality Media Patreon. And that leads into the first bit of news and updates that I wanted to share with you guys. Open Minds Media will now be known as Bizarre Reality Media. I wanted to rebrand it a little bit to kind of fit what I'm doing with the show. I kind of figured that Open Minds Media doesn't really fit exactly what I'm doing anymore, and there's a few other places that started up something that's along the lines of Open Minds Media. So if anybody's wondering why everything has drastically changed, Open Minds Media is now, again, Bizarre Reality Media. And continuing on with that, I have also noticed that there has been a lot of complaints about ads on my older episodes, and I finally figured out the root of this problem. It is not my fault on this one. This is completely between when I transferred my RSS host, so the people that, put up my podcast, I transferred over to a new one, which is Spreaker, which is my one that I'm currently using. Apparently what had happened was none of those ads that were on my old RSS host were removed. So for anybody that's listening to the old episodes and complaining about there being way too many ads, there are literally double ads on those that I cannot remove. So I greatly apologize, guys, if there are particular episodes that you guys want to make sure that I switch over, because I'm gonna have to re-upload everything individually if that's the case, and that's over 300 episodes I'm gonna have to do. So it's just a lot of work. So again, I apologize for anybody that's been dealing with those ads, but hopefully, slowly but surely, I will start to correct that problem. And also, speaking of more exciting things, if anybody wants to catch the next Bizarre Inquiries, that will be happening on September 4th around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, now over there on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube and Twitch channels. Still possibly going to set up Rumble at some point soon, but we're going to keep building up to that. And the other thing that I want to build up to is I've been trying to post shorts and all that type of stuff on TikTok. So hopefully at some point I will be able to also be able to broadcast on TikTok live. So just another cool thing over there. And if anybody is still possibly interested in winning a free t-shirt of your choice off of the Bizarre Reality merch store, all you guys have to do is go and fill out a quick 8-question survey. All your guys' thoughts and opinions that goes towards the show to hopefully help the show grow and improve. So if you guys don't mind taking a few minutes to fill that out, I would greatly appreciate it. And at the end of the day, you might end up winning a free t-shirt of your choice off of the store. So win-win situation as far as I'm concerned. And again, I appreciate your guys' opinions. So if you guys don't mind taking the extra few minutes, it would mean absolutely the world to me. And if anybody is interested in being a guest on the show, sharing their experiences or encounters, or contacting me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can call or text the Bizarre Reality hotline. That number is 313-364-1551, and you guys can call or text 24/7. Whatever happens to be easier for you guys. And if you guys happen to miss that, that number is available down in the show notes. And if you guys would be interested in supporting the show, there are a handful of different ways that you guys can do so. First and foremost, you guys can go and follow the show on Instagram or Facebook. you guys can always go and check out the Patreon with 2 tiers available, ad-free / early access and full access. Try to make it a little bit easier for you guys. And with full access, you get this show, Bizarre Encounters, the 0.5 episodes, a lot of bang for your buck over there. So definitely worth going and checking out. The other way you guys can support the show is by going and checking out the Bizarre Reality merch store with t-shirts starting at just $15.68 plus shipping. Not too bad considering that most t-shirts run about $20, and with shipping, it'll run you about $20, and you guys will be able to support a smaller podcast in the process. So greatly appreciate it. And if you guys buy a shirt, send me a picture of it and I will give you guys a big shout out and post it on the social media pages. And the next way you guys can support the show is by leaving a review or rating for the show on any podcatcher you happen to use. It's been a hot minute since I've had a review that I can read on the show. So if you guys wouldn't mind taking an extra minute to do it, I'd greatly appreciate it. And I will read on the show and give you guys a big shout out. And if you think that anybody else might enjoy the show or a particular episode, you guys can always go and share the show with a friend through word of mouth, because grassroots support from you guys is exactly how the show grows. And you guys can also go and check out live shows over there on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube and Twitch channels. You guys could always donate to the show directly, buy me an energy drink to keep me up through the night to be able to edit these long episodes for you guys. You guys can also go and check out the affiliate links with additional discounts and credits available. And the last way you guys can support the work that I do over here is by also going and checking out my other show, Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin. A little bit different of a format as far as it's a lot of us deep diving into stuff, but it might be an extra podcast to get you through the work week, and it might be even another show that you guys can talk about with your friends and give you guys some new means of conversation and things to talk about. But every single thing that I mentioned is all available on the link tree, which is available down in that show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome back to the show for way too long since he's had his second appearance. Please welcome back to the show, Lon Strickler from Phantoms and Monsters. How's it going today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Not doing too bad. Absolute pleasure to have you back on the show after, I think we said about 1.5 years, 2 years since you've been on the show.
Yeah, I don't know how long it's been. It's kind of, time kind of, it's kind of relative now. I mean, I don't, I just go by the flow,
I mean, especially when you're researching and stuff too. I mean, you really get kind of hyper-focused into one thing, and then time goes by really quick because you're trying to do your normal life and then take your time to be able to focus in on that research and stuff. So it ends up going pretty quick, especially when you have like a passion and something that you're really into doing. Not enough time in the day.
Yeah, it's been a lot of stuff going on. I've been busy and trying to keep up and, not get too far behind, but yeah, it's been interesting the past couple of months.
Well, I guess with part of that, we can kind of start off some of the work that you've had going on in the past, I guess, 1.5 years, 2 years. First of which, of course, was a few issues you've had with the website. So I'm sure you want to give people a little bit of an update on that before we get into stuff.
Well, it's back up. I mean, phantomsandmonsters.com, it's back up. We had a crash, actually. I mean, the old platform just literally fried on me. And I went in there and everything just went goodbye, and it's good I had a backup. So, but it took a while to get, I did hire somebody to build the new site, and that kind of fell through. Then I got somebody else who, fortunately, was somebody who knows what I do and was a listener, on the podcast as well as a reader. So they kind of knew what was going on. So they got it up pretty quick.
So I'm glad that it ended up coming up pretty quick, because I know there's a lot of researchers that end up using your website, and it's one of those things that it's like you kind of get like a little bit of an appearance on every show. So I'm sure that, considering that the website's kind of like your main focus, it was probably felt like you had like almost like an arm cut off while the website was down.
Well, I've been doing the site for 20 years, almost every day, and it was different. I mean, basically, I was busy, but I felt bored because I wasn't doing the blog anymore. So
I guess at least while you were doing that, you mentioned that you were at least working on a new book. I don't know if that's a positive thing or a negative thing, that you, I guess, had something to keep your mind preoccupied with, but on the flip side, just a lot going on. But
I don't know. It was a lot of anxiety. And, when the site went down, I kind of flipped out and I thought, oh God, I had never experienced a total crash like that. I mean, I've had small crashes, but something that I can recover pretty quickly. But this just literally wiped everything out. But I did, like I said, I had the archive backed up. So, yeah, so when we got it back going, you know, we got a few bells and whistles to straighten out yet. But all in all, it's, you know, I'm posting every day again. So hopefully everything goes good.
Yeah, for sure. I would say diving into at least your book, because I know that at least you know, something to keep you a little bit preoccupied while you weren't taking in too much stuff. And I'm sure we could probably dive into some of the newer stuff you've been taking in on Phantoms and Monsters. But first and foremost, I want to be able to dive into this new book that you were talking about, because it's a phenomenon that we've definitely talked about a little bit on the show, but I don't think we've actually had anybody that's, you know, written a book on it. So it's definitely something that we could dive into.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a book written about it. It's what we call the Glimmer Man, and it's basically an invisible type being, even though it's kind of can be partially seen. Think about the Predator from the Predator films and the cloaking that the alien in the Predator films maintains, and people for maybe about the past decade or so have been seeing something very similar to that and reporting it. So myself and Kyle and Cam over at Expanded Perspectives, we've been looking into this phenomenon now for quite a while, and we decided a while back we were going to go ahead and write, when we got enough reports, we were going to go ahead and write a book about it, give our perspective as to what it was. And we'll see how it goes.
Well, I guess a good spot to start off with the whole Glitterman phenomenon. When did it start coming to attention for you exactly? Because I don't know exactly who was the one who coined the term, but I'm sure that it was probably a mixture between either you or probably Monsters Among Us taking in reports of this. But do you know like when these reports kind of started out for these?
Yeah, Monsters Among Us, they had a few reports, but Kyle and Cam over Expanded Perspectives, they started getting a lot of reports, and then they contacted me, I guess about 8 or 9 years ago, and we started looking into it. And as they were sending me things, and people started sending me sightings and such, and it kind of got to the point where we were getting a report here and there, and I think we probably have got close to 80 to 90 reports over the years. So we decided to go ahead and write the book, and we're going to each of us going to have some of our perspective in there as to what we believe the phenomena entails, and a little bit of the background on it and a few other things that might be compared to it. So hopefully it'll be a book that people enjoy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a phenomenon that a lot of people are talking about. But like I mentioned, it doesn't seem like there's much documentation on it. I guess another spot to kind of go into this is for anybody that may not be familiar with what exactly like a typical encounter would be for this thing, like where they're typically seen, if there's maybe some particular encounters that stick out a little bit. And then I'd like to kind of get into a little bit on what you potentially think this might be.
Well, I'd say the vast majority of the sightings are in the outdoors, and a lot of those are hunters, especially those who are in tree stands during deer season, because they'll be up there off the ground about 10 foot or so, and while they're sitting there, they'll see something moving in the trees, though they really can't distinguish a form until it starts to move a little bit more, and that shimmering effect. And the Glimmer Man, I think that was coined by Kyle and Cam, be honest with you. But and it's not the movie Glimmer Man. I mean, people kind of confuse that.
More like Predator.
But yeah, I mean, when people talk about it, and I have seen a couple of photographs of actual sightings of these things, and that's what it looks like. It looks just like the Predator from the movie. Now, the one thing that we were kind of interested in was what the origin of it was, and the guy who wrote the screenplay was what was high. it was Joel Hynek. Yeah, Joel Hynek. He was the son of the guy from the Project Blue Book, and he wrote the script. But now I have heard a few explanations as to what he said kind of sparked the whole thing. I still got a feeling, and I think this happens a lot of time when pop culture gets involved, entwined with other phenomena. And just like when I was doing, the reports with the Mothman sightings in Chicago, people were kind of comparing it to the Jeepers Creepers creature from the films. And that does happen because when people see something, they kind of compare it to something that they're familiar with. So that's what you get. So now I don't know if that has any connection or not, but when people describe this thing, they invariably tell you, well, it looked kind of like the cloaking of that predator alien from the films. So yeah, and like I said before, I saw some photographs of the phenomena, and it kind of does look like that.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show. See, it's one of those things with movies that you kind of wonder if it's possible that there is something weird going on with the phenomenon, that it's a matter of them also trying to control the narrative on it a little bit. Because even kind of diving into a little bit more of an obscure one, but like Harry and the Hendersons, for example, people kind of have that motif when it comes to Sasquatch, but you look into like some of the funding of that movie and you realize that there's actually a couple different government organizations that partly funded that movie so that it could be produced and made. So then again, you start kind of questioning where the interest is with these things being in the movies. Is it something that somebody had an experience and they try to mimic it? Or is it a matter of sometimes they try to control the narrative by trying to kind of push for certain movies to get made so that when people associate this thing, they come up with something from a movie and the average person, for example, may not listen to them because, there's a lot of different ideas on the phenomenon, whether it could potentially be them with maybe even biosuits for this one, or if it could potentially be something else altogether. But they definitely would have an interest in covering up the phenomenon because either one, it's their own technology, or on the other side, it's a phenomenon that they can't quite explain. And once you kind of start dealing with that stuff, I mean, that's like paradigm shattering for a lot of people, because even something as simple as Sasquatch, you tell them Sasquatch exists, and you don't know what that could mentally like do to a lot of people as far as like breaking their religious paradigms where exactly it needs to fit in, or even just being scared to even be near the woods, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that would be horrified if they knew that there was something like that out there 100% for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think kind of the originator, even though it might not have been the first film where the government got involved with, was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because, I know there were a lot of people that were involved behind the scenes with that, even though Spielberg will deny it. He kind of hints that there was something involved, but I think... I think there was some. I think there was some government involvement with that, and I think there have been others as well, especially movies involving aliens and UFOs and such. So, if that may have been the case with the Predator, I really don't know.
The only reason I brought that up is because you mentioned the Project Bluebeam thing. And for anybody that may not be familiar with Project Bluebeam, it's basically this fake alien invasion idea. So it's like, if you did have potentially this type of biosuit, or you were working on some type of advanced technology, it'd be perfect to instantly have people associate that with aliens so that later on you could pull it up for a Project Bluebeam type of operation. But I would say the only reason I linked it to possibly a biosuit, which is something I kind of thought about because I've kind of correlated that some of these sightings happen around military bases, but that's kind of one of those things that's kind of a toss-up, because when it comes to most weird phenomenon, there's a lot of this correlation with military bases. But round circle, I'd like to kind of hear what some of your opinions are on this thing, what you think it could potentially be.
I believe it's probably not of this earth. I think it's either an ultra-terrestrial, maybe an interdimensional being of some type, which I believe it may very well be something that's connected to most cryptids in general. I didn't really, I was kind of 50-50 on that until I got involved with the Chicago Mothman. And after talking to witnesses and them giving their stories of what they had seen these things literally manifest out of thin air and vice versa. I definitely believe that was an interdimensional being. And I think most cryptids are. Because there are just too many instances where they just suddenly appear and then just suddenly disappear. And that's just not, winged humanoids. That's all Bigfoot, cryptid canines, So could it be that? Yeah, I think it's a possibility. I mean, could it be a cloaked alien? Who knows? I mean, is it something very similar to what was written in the movie? Was it something that somebody had seen years and years ago? And the screenwriter got kind of wind of it, or maybe they may have seen it themselves and wrote about it. I think that does happen. I think that does happen in TV shows and in films where personal experiences of unexplained activity just suddenly gets on a screen, on a script, and it's presented to the public. And then later on down the road, if something is seen very similar to what was on the in the screenplay or in the film itself, people start relating to it. So maybe there is something to that.
I mean, I was kind of wondering, even with the possibility of this thing like being interdimensional, if it is some type of interdimensional being, I guess there's two different possibilities to it. I mean, either one, you have the possibility that it could be some type of just somewhat standard extraterrestrial, maybe like a mantis, maybe like, even a gray, something that's more of like the Watcher type. Because I guess that you'd have to assume that if they are the Watcher type, and a lot of the time people have these experiences where they kind of just observe them from a distance, they would assumably have something to be able to cloak themselves, even if it's maybe people see the glimmer because it's moving and it's intended to be a cloaking mechanism where they're supposed to stand still and then it becomes completely transparent. Or if you get into like you were kind of mentioning the extraterrestrial aspect of these things, people are kind of imagining it with like a human shape. And I don't know how like definite the human shape is, or if it's just a matter of the mind just trying to create a human shape when they're seeing this object thing moving. But, maybe if we're dealing with something a little bit more interdimensional, it could be something that isn't necessarily as fathomable from our perspective, meaning that it could be some type of like conscious being, but it might be something that's more like a gaseous being or like some type of like an energy being or something like that. And the reason why you're seeing it the way you do is because that's literally what its true form is it doesn't have this solid physical form like it would in our reality. It's rather this like amorphous moving object that when it's perceived in our reality, it almost kind of gives this broken prism kind of glimmer effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to that. Honestly, I guess maybe we'll find more, as more evidence comes forward. But at this point now, it's just one of those subjects that we really don't know. And most cryptids, we really don't know what we are dealing with. And, we can kind of give a bit of a guess or a theory, maybe have a little bit of try to explain the evidence as to what people see and what they tell you, and but until we get some real physical evidence, some real physical or some some theory that does make sense to what we are getting now, and as maybe in the future will be explained. All we can do is just make our own guess as to what it is, and maybe we will be right, but who knows?
That's what I'm always saying about the phenomenon is a lot of the time you just kind of have to throw theories at the wall, and sometimes they stick, sometimes they work, sometimes they really don't. But kind of going into these experiences, at least from a lot that I've heard, they're usually not anything aggressive. It's usually something like somebody's up in a tree stand and they kind of see this mirage effect. I've even seen it kind of associated with some of the Sasquatch stuff where people will see these glimmerman type things moving around in trees. But have you kind of come across anything that maybe seems like a more aggressive encounter, or does it always seem like it's kind of just these things kind of passing off in the distance?
Yeah, they seem to be curious. They do hang around residents. Sometimes people will see them through a window in a home, or they'll be out on the balcony and they'll see this thing in the tree or across from them looking at them. Sometimes they have yellow eyes. The yellow eyes will show up just like in the film. And So, but it's one of these phenomena that it's just not concentrated in one area. I mean, we've gotten reports worldwide. So yeah. So whatever it is, it's coming more and more prevalent, and people are reporting it as they see it. I'm quite sure there've been a lot of people who have seen this and just thought they were seeing things, or it was something that they just didn't want to tell anybody because they think they're crazy. So, but it has been interesting, some of the sightings that we've gotten.
So it seems like it's typically around like more like nature areas, correct?
Yeah. Well, though I had one right in the middle of Chicago.
Chicago's a weird spot. There's a lot of stuff, and it's like a lot of people have eyes on this stuff there. Like,
yeah, Chicago is a weird town because it's known for a lot of paranormal activity, a lot of UFO activity, and that's something we had to consider when we were looking into the winged humanoid phenomena. What was tied into it, and we've got all kinds of theories, though nothing has really panned out yet. But we do make some assumptions as to what it is. I think the closest thing to what we have made an assumption is that it's possibly a supernatural being of some type, and people describe the red eyes. Light projecting red eyes is not natural. I mean, it's supernatural basically, and then they have the ability to fly without using their wings, and they do all these crazy maneuvers, and then they appear and disappear. And yeah, I mean, there's something about that. And of course, I had my encounter of something very similar to that back in '88 here in Pennsylvania, and it was almost exactly what people are seeing in Chicago. So yeah, it's a worldwide phenomenon, and I'm quite sure it's going to continue on. It's not one of those things that you get a couple of sightings and then nobody sees it again. It's people are actually finding references to it online in particular, and then they're recognizing, hey, I saw something like that a while back, and then they kind of rack their brain and decide that they're going to go ahead and make a report about it. So that's how all this stuff starts, and it kind of snowballs. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but this phenomenon itself seems to be one that's going to keep continuing on, and we're going to get more reports about it.
Say, it seems like I've kind of noticed this thing where like the phenomenon kind of shifts as far as, I don't want to necessarily say the faces of it, like a lot of people kind of mentioned, but rather I feel like we are kind of learning how to divide stuff up a little bit better, because as people, we kind of categorize things. And like my explanation for this being like, I think that a lot of these Dogman reports, because it didn't really become prevalent as far as Dogman stuff goes until relatively recently, I think there was a lot of Sasquatch encounters that people were relating with Dogman because it was kind of their closest thing at the time to be able to relate. So a lot of this Glimmerman stuff, I'm kind of curious if this potentially goes back a lot farther and people are kind of putting it under the facade of possibly like something that's a ghost or like the paranormal or something, because it kind of fits under that lane too. And even with like the Mothman stuff, I'm kind of curious if people were even relating that to even something else farther back where, I mean, you have like the Raven Mockers and stuff when you talk about like Native American stuff. But I mean, even going into like, 1800s. I mean, some of these mystery airship sightings that people claim to have seen like red orbs and like different things flying in the sky. Some of these could have potentially been even like Mothman encounters. And I know there was a lot in the Midwest. So there could have been even some near Chicago at the time that we just didn't have the categorization for. So, maybe the phenomenon is kind of changing, or maybe it's a matter of we're kind of learning how to divide this stuff up a little bit better instead of just putting a blanket term across anything that fits into that category. And I mean, you see that a lot, especially with a lot of this stuff, that it was all kind of divided lanes where there was the UFO guys, the paranormal guys, the cryptid guys. And now at this point, it seems like everybody more than ever is really like converging, where a lot of the paranormal people that wouldn't do anything with anybody else are really starting to do stuff with Sasquatch people, because everybody's realizing all this phenomenon seems to be related in some way, shape, or form.
Well, in recent years in particular, and I've been talking about the supernatural aspect of Bigfoot and other creatures for years now. There have been a few of us out there saying that for a while, but we always got pushed back. And but I think as time has gone on, especially with Bigfoot, I mean, we're not getting the physical evidence that you would for a creature of that size, and the amount of sightings that we are getting as well.
There's not that many
And,
liars in the world that are like, that shook and traumatized over an encounter. Like,
so, I think as time is going on, most of the people that have been dead set on this thing being a natural creature, and it could very well be flesh and blood, which I think it in some instances it very well is. And there may be some areas where it is indigenous. I mean, Pacific Northwest around the Gulf, a few other areas down in Florida. But all in all, I still believe that most of the sightings that are reported, especially as, single creatures themselves, may very well be supernatural.
Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break, so stay tuned. And now back to the show. I mean, even those like single-handed creatures, the ones you only see one certain time, I mean, you got to also take into consideration that there probably might be some defects if these things are coming from another reality or another place. Like a prime example, I mean, the Dover Demon, that's kind of like a one-off encounter, but it still kind of fits like the idea of like a lot of these underground dwellers, some of the Greys a little bit. So even some of these one-offs, they might not necessarily be one-offs, but they might just be something that just developed a little bit differently, but still kind of fits into the category of these things, because assumably with any species, I mean, there ends up being birth defects within humans. Without these other things, you have to assume that there's probably going to be the same. So again, some of these one-offs might just fit into the category of something else. It's just hasn't quite been formulated, because I know a lot of people talking about the Dover Demon. There's a lot of people that relate it to a lot of like extraterrestrial stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that there was a few UFO sightings around that time, so there might be a correlation behind that.
Yeah, I actually, when I wrote the meme humanoids about the crawlers, I put some information in there about the Dover Demon, because from some of the information that came from the original witnesses, it kind of paralleled what people are talking about with these pale crawler sightings. So is it related? It could be. I mean, it was just something I put in there to kind of get people thinking, as well as the Slender Man, even though that's supposedly a creepypasta type manifestation, that as time went on, and that's why I named it the meme humanoids, is because these things literally turn into internet memes, and sometimes, which I think is very possible, they may turn into some type of thought form manifestation, either tulpa or something, because people many times have said that they've seen these things. Now, is it something that they created themselves in their mind? Is their mind's eye seeing it and they're interpreting it as being an actual living being? It's hard to tell. But, the paranormal itself, and you mentioned this earlier. I mean, there are a lot of parallels. It's very rare that I'll get a sighting report of anything where there's another aspect of the paranormal related to it that's going on. I'll talk to witnesses sometimes, and they'll tell me, well, I saw this, and this, and they're holding back on something. And, and I always ask people, I say, well, did anything else happen, or did you see anything else that doesn't seem related to it? Well, this did happen, and that, and these things kind of come in pairs, if not more. That's just the way it is now. And I think most investigators have to be a little more eclectic about what they look into to try to find answers, because quite frankly, when you start going in other directions, many times you'll get some answers as to what you're really dealing with.
I mean, talking about that, just to bring up a couple different theories I've dived into myself. First and foremost, the idea about these others taking like a different form depending on who they're interacting with. Like, we have an idea that these things, are interdimensional. We already kind of have that in our minds, but we always associate things with having a definite form just because of the fact that, we're in a physical reality. But if these things, for example, are like energy beings, is it possible that whatever they sense that you would fear, they're able to kind of just manipulate and turn into? So it's not that they have a definite form or that they're changing or necessarily a thought form, but that they just show what you would be scared of. Or, I mean, even on the flip side, you have to always enter the idea of like a thought form, that if there's enough people that are putting thought into this thing, maybe there's another dark entity that might just kind of take that shape just so that people will call it by a name. I mean, you kind of see this with a lot of like the demon lore about them taking on these different names or pretending to be other things so that people will worship that name or put focus in on that name, and in turn it gives them more energy. I mean, definitely a possibility. And to bring up also the pale crawler thing that you were mentioning and the rakes and everything that people mention, I mean, at least from my research, I had a strange encounter, and I don't know if I ever shared it on Phantoms and Monsters, but I should type it up and send it in. But I've shared it on a couple shows talking about this weird, lanky, pale crawler-looking being that I had an encounter with in a basement that kind of pushed my way into me doing a lot of this research. And when I started researching it, I kept coming back to this idea of like wendigos. And then you have the typical idea of what most people think with this deer-headed, skeleton-looking creature. But when you start diving into the Native American folklore of it, you realize that they describe it more as these like lanky, zombie-like looking creatures. So then you start wondering like where that came from. And at least from my research, I kind of came to this possible option that it was a matter of people retelling the stories like settlers and kind of putting their spin on it, same as they would take these sacred sites and call it the devil's this, the devil's that. So they just kind of put their idea of like evil paganism on, something that they were already talking about. But correlating it into today, I kind of wonder if everybody has this idea of the wendigo, and that's why it's kind of existing in folklore, so to speak, is because most people aren't encountering this deer-headed thing out in the woods. But it seems like it's super prominent that people are encountering these pale crawler type beings or these rake type beings. And when you look into how the Native Americans described the wendigo, that's exactly the motif of them. And part of the lore was the fact that from the first snowfall to the last snowfall, you weren't safe because that's when they were out. But the rest of the year, they would go underground, they would go in caves, they'd go in all these places to try to basically preserve themselves from decaying. And a lot of these pale crawler / rake sightings seem to be around caves, and a lot of them are around summer and stuff like that around these caves. So I've kind of wondered if there's a lot of these things that we've kind of pushed into folklore and then renamed, not realizing that we're talking about the same thing that somebody else was, but just because of playing telephone, the original idea is turned into something completely different from what it actually was or described as.
Yeah, I mean, it's all perception, basically. I mean, everybody, if you get one object or one creature and you got 100 people looking at it, you're going to get 100 different answers or descriptions as to what you've got for the most part. There are going to be some variations, but, could there be a relation between all of these things? Sure. They just may be different races or different beings in some respect and just different. That's what made the meme humanoid book I wrote kind of difficult to do anyway, because, you really don't know what you're dealing with. You kind of go outside the box to try to put examples out there. And I already had a lot of different reports. And, but there were differences. There were, body differences, color differences, aggressiveness, non-aggressiveness, a lot of different things. So you really don't know what the whole book was basically putting the information out there for the readers to kind of make up their own mind, which is what I kind of do anyway with Phantoms and Monsters, because, I don't necessarily want to put my opinion out there as to what I believe it is, even though I will occasionally, or when somebody will ask me. But I want to present what's presented to me and let them figure out or get their own interpretation as to what this person saw.
So you mentioned the meme humanoids thing, and obviously when most people think about that, they think about, the rake, for example. They think about Slenderman, like you mentioned. What are some of these other ones that people have reported or encountered that you covered in the book, for example? Because those are the main two I always hear, and I'm kind of interested if there's what are some of the other ones are.
Well, there's different types of things, and I think a lot of stuff that people just don't really have another name for. I tried to stay away from Wendigo because basically a Wendigo is a human that has cannibalistic tendencies, and the folklore has really gotten deep into that whole thing. Chad Lewis wrote a great book about the Wendigo and about the lore and the actual indigenous religious or even theories about what it actually was. And there were some real examples of that, people actually turning into a type of cannibal-like creature.
Yeah, there was the Swift case. I remember he like ate his whole family, and there was like a supply output like not even that far away. It would have only taken him maybe like a couple hours to get there. So he had more than a means to go get supplies, and he resorted to cannibalism and ate his whole family.
That was probably the most famous case about it. Yeah. So, I mean, there was those examples. You have people that do a lot of weird stuff that could be associated with the Wendigo and, the cannibalism and the attacks and the strange behavior. You could look at lycanthropy, as far as someone acting like a canid and attacking people and eating people and such. That's been part of the lore itself. That's kind of got expanded into movies and everything and books and stuff over the years. But as far as my book and what I got examples of were just examples that people described to me. Now, basically, they were many of the times they were the tall, lanky, gaunt-looking, hairless white beings that kind of had a head like a gray alien, and the body had long arms, thin legs, and such. But there were other descriptions too, and you talked about aggressiveness. Now, there was one situation. It was here in Pennsylvania where a woman had been moving and she was driving a van, and this thing literally came out of the bushes alongside a rural road in eastern Pennsylvania and jumped into the back of the van. And this thing, the description was a kind of a brown color, but it was hairless. It was gaunt. But this thing tried to attack her while I was in the van. So, when I did talk to her, and she explained it to me, I'm thinking to myself, well, there's got to be something. This thing had to have been something else. I mean, because it's just not what we have received about this phenomena. But as time went on and we started looking into it further and further, I kind of came to the conclusion that this was something very similar to what others had seen, but it would just look different and just acted different. So, you can't really peg one type of characteristic or behavior of one being into being something different. They may very well be, just like with Bigfoot, maybe different races or other creatures that are cryptids with other races. Even Dogman, because there are different sightings and different descriptions of the cryptid canines. So, it's kind of hard to make a distinguishing, put it into a title or into a group of beings. I kind of did best I could with it, but I kind of, what I did was just took all the reports I had, put it out there, and maybe put a little bit of explanation with a little bit of differences between other sightings. But, again, I'd left it to the imagination of the reader and let them think for themselves.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to that deep conversation you crave. Say, talking about the the underground dwelling type beings, and I mean even kind of correlating it back with like the Native American Wendigo stuff. I mean, the Native American stuff to begin with, when you dive into a lot of these stories, it's like hard to decide whether it's supposed to be metaphor for something or if it's supposed to be extremely literal, because it's very back and forth within these explanations. So even within that, it kind of makes you wonder if there could be a mixture of things, like they were experiencing and seeing these underground weird, humanoid looking beings, and they didn't understand what they were. So they started correlating two things together where, maybe they had these serial killer type mentality people that would pop up every once in a while in society, and they didn't really have that motif of what exactly a serial killer was. So the only explanation could possibly be that some type of monster took them over. So if they're seeing these weird things, and then they're also seeing somebody do these weird things, maybe they kind of correlate them together as monsters. And I mean, kind of getting a little bit deeper and maybe even kind of combining it partially with some conspiracy theories. I'm sure everybody, for the most part, has kind of at least heard a little bit of the whole adrenochrome concept. And bringing that back a little bit, I mean, the root of it is essentially ingesting somebody's adrenaline gland. And when you kind of start diving back into some of these like old warrior type societies, that was usually part of the motif, was like if you took somebody down, you take parts of them. Sometimes they take skulls, sometimes they chew on the adrenal glands, for example. And maybe if there was like one of these warrior types that was their thing, they chew the adrenal gland every time. There's a lot of conspiracies that go into the impact that has on the body. So if you had this warrior type where he just was, doing this part of the ritual, he was going crazy because obviously you're taking on adrenal glands. But within that, you're also having this thing where he's becoming addicted to it because it's a drug and it's starting to kind of absorb him and take him in. So maybe his face is starting to cave in a little bit, kind of correlating the two again. They're seeing these weird monsters, and then they're starting to see people in their village turn into something that looks relatively like it. So it might be a combination metaphor for things, if that makes sense. Like multiple things kind of combining and becoming one thing, which you see with a lot of this like old folklore stuff. And then it's hard to decide where exactly it happens, because you see this happen today where everything starts getting blended, and then you realize that this has been going for generations where everything's getting blended, and it's really hard to get to the root of any of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, most times when you do get a description of something that just doesn't quite fit into anything else, if you look hard enough, you'll usually find something that's related to it. Though it may not be true, but I mean, it's all perception, because, it's interesting when the way people do see stuff that they don't understand, and when they describe it. There have been times, though it doesn't happen as much as I think it used to, where people would try to embellish on a lot of sightings. And, that kind of makes it tough to do the research, because, they seem to want to satisfy you more so than anything else. They want you to be happy with what they saw. And, maybe try to sensationalize it. But all in all, I mean, there have been times when I have gotten a report of something and I had no idea what it was. It does happen occasionally. So, there's been a lot. If I went back and pulled all the sightings of something I just can't explain, there are quite a few out there. But I do keep a record of it, and maybe something will show up that'll kind of parallel to it.
I mean, that's the only thing you really can do is like start to parallel, because I mean, a lot of people rely on some of these like really, really old origin sightings of things, but in all fairness, it's like they were the first that were trying to see and describe this thing. So it's not like you can necessarily go off of what they're saying. And a good correlation for that is look at the whole airship phenomenon to UFO phenomenon now. If you look at the very first people that were seeing these things and try to use their terminology and their descriptions for these things, you're going to be out in the middle of nowhere. But if you use the more recent UFO descriptions of things, then you have a little bit more ground to work with. So a lot of people, I feel, with this phenomenon in general, it's good to look into the history of it, but they're trying to use the history as the foundation of their research, not correlating it with other subjects, realizing that like that's literally the minimal amount of information you could really get on it, because people had no idea and they were just trying to describe what they saw. Like you have to correlate that with the new information, and you can't just only solely rely on, I found this old piece of information, so this must be the absolute truth on it. Because even like the Native American stuff, I mean, this stuff has probably been around way before them, and a lot of people use that as the origin for a lot of things, but it's like, they were the most far back person that we could think of describing it, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't here for hundreds, thousands, whatever years before them.
Yeah, I mean, and I do enjoy reading the old newspaper accounts. I mean, the language itself and how they describe stuff is pretty unbelievable to me. But usually, if you are reading these and you start seeing connections between other sightings, and you think, well, that had to have been a Bigfoot, or that had to have been a UFO, or whatever. And even though they kind of use the flowery language in description, inevitably, and it's inevitable that that's what you're dealing with. I used to laugh at all the reports used to come out of Coney Island in particular, that part of New York near the beaches and stuff, back in the late 1800s, when people would see all kinds of crazy stuff out there, and they had no idea what it was. And winged humanoids and flying craft and people flying around and this and that. It's just a lot of that out there. A lot of that was being reported. Now you got to wonder, well, were they just trying to sell papers or what were they trying to do? But, when you do look at it and then later on you get another report of something very similar to that, then that maybe there's something to it. But all in all, you can usually take what they describe and put it in more modern terms. You'll come up with something that people are seeing now. So,
I mean, a prime example of that is a lot of the Fae stuff. I mean, you dive into like the 1800s and there's so many different weird Fae reports and people just like, you read that now and most people that aren't really diving into the phenomenon, they're like, oh, fairies. They instantly just throw it off as it's complete fiction. But then when you start correlating it now, you realize that there is so much with the UFO phenomenon that correlates with the Fae phenomenon. And once you start connecting dots, you realize that we were probably talking about the same phenomenon the whole time. It's just a matter of perspective. When you have this idea about like disappearing realities and like pocket realities, like the whole interdimensional concept wasn't really prevalent to people back then. So the only way that they could really describe it was through these folklore stories of the Fae. So again, it's like you have to correlate it with the modern day stuff that it completely looks ridiculous in the past. But if you're looking at present information, then a lot of this stuff starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't normally like to use the old reports, but occasionally I will find one that, beyond all the crazy language that they used back then in descriptions, and many of it was very racist, so you got to be careful what you're looking at.
Especially the Snallygaster, that one's...
Yeah. Well, I'm from that area. I'm in that area because the Snallygaster sightings... I mean, they were very prevalent around here for years. And you kind of take it with a grain of salt. And I don't know what people were really seeing back then. I mean, if they were seeing anything at all. I mean, I think they might have got some kind of gut rot whiskey or something that got into the whole story. But
one person saw a crane with an octopus in its mouth, and then it all just kind of went from there because of the old papers,
Yeah, I mean, everybody's inebriated and they all see the same thing, but none of them's going to come up with a real description as to what it was. I mean, and they're going to, as time goes on, it's going to be more added to it. And, then some reporter will come talking to him and he'll have an entirely different description as to what they really saw. So, yeah. And that's what makes me laugh when I get the Bigfoot reports during the Civil War, because there were some. And, of course, they didn't know what it was. It was all wild man back then. That's the only description they could give. There was no concept of a possible primate that's running around the woods during a war,
Even Teddy Roosevelt had a reference to coming across a wild man at one point during one of his journals or something. I think he was where was he at? Near like Colorado or something like that. He was heading like west.
I think it was in Colorado. Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, he wrote about it, and he didn't really know what he was dealing with either. But a lot of these explorers back then, the people that were going west, ran into a lot of different things they just couldn't explain. Even here in the East, I mean, people I knew in the town where I lived that there were a couple of reports of wild men coming into town. So what did they see? Did they see an actual feral human being, or did they see a hairy hominid of some type that just showed up and they couldn't give it? They had no explanation, no concept of what it was. So they just used the typical wild man theory, and that was that.
I mean, depending on the time, too, I've kind of noticed this weird correlation. And it was the fact that these like hermit type people, back in the day, if it was like 1800s, early 1900s, it seems like if there was a hermit man, typically, he'd grow out his beard, he'd be all covered in hair, they would start to associate him with these wild man stories. And then on the flip side, if there was like a hermit woman, they would associate her with these like witch house or these witch stories. So I'm kind of curious how many of these old Civil War stories, for example, could have just been these like hermit type people. And that's the way that they described them, and even that being split, because there could have been people that were literally using the term like that's a wild man, that's like a hermit man, and then there was could have been other people that were literally seeing Sasquatch type beings, and the closest thing they could relate them to was these hermit type wild men, so they just started calling them that because that was their closest relation at the time. So even a hard separation within those stories.
I think, I think some of those sightings were legitimate. It's hard to believe that you get so many sightings of Bigfoot nowadays, especially in areas where a lot of the battles were fought. I mean, in the eastern part of the United States, in the mountains and such, people see report Bigfoot cryptid canines all the time. It's hard to believe that people who were actually fighting in the war didn't see something. That could have very well have been that. So,
especially disturbing the land, making a lot of noise too.
Exactly.
I mean, that's like they're turning up where they live. So of course they're going to start popping up.
Yeah, exactly. So, you kind of take it with a grain of salt, but when you start digging into it, I don't think I have it anymore. I think I sold it, but I had a letter that was written by a soldier who he was out of a New York regiment, but he talked about they were guarding a depot and they saw a wild man, and he described it as being all hair and such, and that when it broke into the depot and where they were stockpiling all this stuff, and people were shooting at it, and it just ran off, and like it never got hit by this thing, or it got away somehow. I mean, did they see a supernatural being of some type? Was it a Bigfoot? You hear a lot of the Bigfoot stories where they, people say, I shot this thing and it didn't do a thing. It just, kind of go through them. So maybe they were dealing with that as well.
Inquiries About Reality will return after this quick commercial break. And we are back, so let's hop right in. I mean, even on a more physical idea, I mean, just to play devil's advocate too, I mean, these things are huge. You don't know how thick their skin could potentially be. I know that there's a few animals that it's like you can shoot their skin and it's not going to break the skin. I mean, if these things are these like apex predators, I mean, I'm sure they have some type of natural defense, even for each other. And considering that rock throwing is so prevalent within these things, assumably, if they've been doing this for years, I mean, they might even do it to warring tribes, for example. They may have kind of built up having somewhat of like a tough exterior. And I know that I've read a few reports of people just, straight up putting a shot into one of these things right in front of them, and it just acting like it hasn't even been touched by it. I mean, there's definitely the possibility that it's going right through it if it's something a little bit more paranormal. But again, just to play devil's advocate, if these things are more physical, I mean, who knows how potentially thick their skin could be where, these things might not actually be fully penetrating.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard countless stories about that, where people say, well, I took a shot at it and I saw a flash of light, and the thing, it didn't even affect the thing. It's like it went right through it, or, the shot itself just dissipated. Stan Gordon, he'd tell you a bunch of them because he's had a lot of accounts in Western Pennsylvania where people have had encounters with these things, and they say, well, I took a shot at it and I saw a bright light, and this thing either disappeared or it stood there and didn't act like it was shot at all. So, it makes you wonder. I mean, again, here we are coming back with the whole supernatural aspect of these creatures and what they really are and what abilities they do possess it's just hard for us to imagine what it is.
I mean, even going into like the Dogman stuff to kind of continue on with that. I mean, you hear these encounters of people shooting a Dogman and going right through them like a cloud of smoke. Yeah. And then on the flip side, you hear about these encounters where somebody will put 2 shots into them and they'll watch them drop. And then they end up having these weird interactions from, secret organizations, for example. Like I know that there was one that's a pretty prevalent case that happened in Michigan in the Manistee, that there was a truck driver who was checking on his tires. He got back into the cab of his truck and this thing came running out of the woods, and he's apparently from literally sitting in his driver's seat, put 2 shots in this thing, watched it roll and fall off the side or roll onto the side of the road. And then he left, came back, and it was already gone. And from there, he ended up getting a bunch of weird phone calls and stuff saying like, you've damaged our property and you're going to pay for it type of stuff. So even within that, it's weird that there's these very physical 2 shots done, and then there's the ones that just go right through them.
I received a story from a truck driver in Reed, Michigan, who said he literally had a 9mm and shot on the passenger side. This thing was looking through the window. He knows he hit it. It dropped off, but then he looked back and the thing got up and ran off. So, you hear those stories all the time.
Say, and then when it comes to stuff like that too, kind of coming full circle, like we were kind of saying in the beginning with, possible potential of like humans being involved in this type of stuff, it makes you kind of wonder if we're seeing something that's actually existing out there, like fully existing in its supernatural form. And in turn, because we see potential in that, it makes you wonder if there's government organizations that have an interest in trying to mimic or make some type of their variation of that. And maybe some of these physical things that people are interacting with are these ones that have some type of government interaction with it, like whether they spliced it together and created it or whatever they happen to do on the other side of it. And then on the other side, these things that people are shooting through and it's going right through are these more natural things that they're trying to mimic. Because, I always say this on the show, what not a better weapon than to have something that you could drop into a base, it can go rampant and kill a bunch of people, and then anybody that tells the stories, there's no tie back to you, and nobody has any idea that it was yours because it just sounds like a folklore story. It's a perfect weapon.
Exactly.
But I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end of the main show. And for all the listeners out there, we are going to be diving into a 0.5 episode, diving into some of your recent canine investigations. But considering that, the blog's back up and running, I want to leave the listeners with maybe a couple of your favorite recent stories that you've pulled from Phantoms and Monsters before we start wrapping stuff up.
Like I said, I've been kind of gathering a lot of stories since the website was down. The canine, which I'm going to talk about, is probably the most interesting because both accounts, and the one I had earlier, it was in the same general area, but it involved human interaction with these creatures.
So I guess that's a perfect leeway in then. I guess that we will just leave all of the reports for the 0.5. And wrapping up the main episode, I still do words of wisdom. So if there is any words of wisdom that you might want to bestow on the listeners today, what might it be?
Just keep your eyes open. And, if you see something, report it. It's much easier to do nowadays. People are less inclined to stay away from researchers and investigators, and find somebody who will just not take your report and not interact with you. You want to get somebody who's going to maybe try to explain it to you if you have questions. Not everybody's crazy. There's the sightings in Chicago are a big example of that. People had no idea what they were seeing or what they were encountering. But, when you get 180 some people seeing the same thing, you kind of know something's going on.
Very true. And even on the flip side of that, I know that there's a lot of people that they just feel better to get it off their chest. I know I've talked to a lot of investigators where it's like somebody was just like, all right, here's the story. You do what you want with it. I don't want any part of it anymore. I just want to get it off my chest. So if you're one of those people, you can always submit this stuff anonymously, get it off your chest, and, let us investigate it and do it all on our own. So even if you don't want to be part of it, you can still submit it anonymously.
Exactly.
Hold on tight, guys. This is our last break, so stay tuned. And we are back to the show. So let's hop right in. And if anybody wanted to come and check out your books or any of the awesome work you're doing, or even Phantoms and Monsters itself, where can people come and find you across the internet?
You can go to phantomsmonsters.com. That's the blog I've been literally running for 20 years now. I've got a podcast on YouTube, Phantoms and Monsters Radio. You got to do a search that, it'll come up. I've written 9 books, but there are actually 4 of them that are in print right now. Another one will be coming out in a couple months.
Perfect. So for all the listeners that want to listen to the K9 investigation, make sure you guys go and check out the Patreon. And Lon, I appreciate you making the time to come on today, and I'm looking forward to getting into the second conversation with you.
Sounds good.
If anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofallrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the 2 that I'm the most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through submission form, which is available up at the top of the link tree and will go directly to my email. And the last way you guys can get a hold of me is through the hotline. You guys can call or text that 24/7, whatever's easier for you guys, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you missed any of that, it is available down in the show description and off the link tree. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with the mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities,